Welcome to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and today we're going to be talking about workforce development with Deb Stopak, Director of Advancement for SkillSource. Welcome, Deb.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here and talk about the SkillSource Group, referred to as SkillSource, and what we can do for you, for employers, and for our community.
So a lot of people are not, when you talk about workforce development, a lot of people are like, well, what exactly does that mean? And there is a national focus on workforce development. There is a structure here in Virginia, and then there's Northern Virginia that has a public-private partnership, and part of that is SkillSource as the nonprofit piece of that. So give us a little bit of background on how SkillSource started in 2003. Help us to understand how it fits in with this larger labor management, and how you came to know about SkillSource.
SkillSource, and let me try to break down exactly what workforce development is, because that can be kind of a foreign term. Basically, what workforce development, the entire country, all states are broken into local workforce areas. Here in Virginia, there are 15 local workforce areas, of which we at SkillSource are the nonprofit fiscal agent for the Northern Virginia Workforce Development Board. That's Area 11, and we serve the counties of Fairfax, Prince William, and Loudoun, as well as the cities of Falls Church, Fairfax, Manassas, and Manassas Park. And what we do, we run we administer one-stop SkillSource centers throughout Northern Virginia. We currently have 6. We are going to be expanding shortly to add a 7th center. Currently, our centers are located in Annandale, in Reston, in Leesburg, in Prince William. We also have a office located on the Manassas campus for the Northern Virginia Community College. And I am forgetting one, Alexandria. I'm sorry.
That's great.
But basically what we do is we serve job seekers who are looking for employment. We also serve employers who are looking for a qualified workforce. In terms of the populations that we serve, we run the gamut from people who are the out-of-school youth, who are ranging from about 17 to 24, and either they have not finished high school or they finished high school but don't have the resources to pursue additional education. We also work with low-income adults, many of whom have lower educational attainment. We work with a community called the dislocated workers, which are workers who have been laid off from employment. Oftentimes, especially in this community where you have defense contractors who will have people on contract employment, these people have fairly high levels of educational attainment, but if the contract runs out and there's not another job, so we serve the dislocated workers as well. That's kind of a broad umbrella, but underneath that broad umbrella, a lot of our focus is on those populations that have additional challenges. Anybody that doesn't have a job has got a huge challenge.
That is true.
Especially in this area, one of the highest levels or highest cost of living in the entire country. So not having a job is a big challenge, but then there are communities within our populations that we serve that face even greater challenges. We work specifically with adults with disabilities who are trying to re-engage with the workforce. Sometimes they can re-engage at full time. Sometimes they need to do it gradually.
And we talked a little bit about the fact that there's many types of disabilities too.
Exactly.
There are physical disabilities and impairments, but there's also intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Correct.
And you and I have Cameron's Coffee and Chocolates in common, because I've spoken about them before on this show, that business was started specifically to employ intellectually and developmentally disabled young adults. And Ellen Graham sits on the board of SkillSource.
She absolutely does. Ellen is on the board of the Northern Virginia Workforce Development Board, and we utilize Cameron's Chocolates on a regular basis as to fill our catering needs if we have specific requirements for that. But again, the populations, and if we can expand beyond just the adults with disabilities, we also have several programs directed toward ex-offenders. And we serve ex-offenders that range from people with short-term white-collar criminal convictions to those people who have been released after serving or being convicted of violent crimes. But what I like to point out is that our programs, and for our program that works with violent offenders, we have a recidivism rate of approximately 4%.
That is super low.
That's outrageous.
That is super low.
In Virginia, generally the recidivism rate ranges about 28 to 35%. Nationally, it can range from 45% and up. If you have been released from jail, if you don't have a job, what are your resources? You need a job and you need a place to live. And if you don't have those, then the chances of reoffending go up exponentially.
They really escalate. But in the whole movement to ban the box was really about that. But banning the box is still only a small part of it, because doing a background check, even if there isn't a box that says, have you ever been convicted of a felony, a background check, because I work with Friends of Guest House in Alexandria, and that's women reentering the workforce and reentering our community. And this is where housing is a huge issue, but the other one is, even if they can get an interview, even if they've gotten a job offer, and there's one woman I spoke with who was offered a job, 3 different jobs, and then when they did a background check, they released her. So, you know, these are underserved populations. When people talk about jobs and the economy, I think we need to be very specific in thinking there's lots of people who have lots of challenges, and it's just not that simple to find an employer who's willing to take a chance. But you do a lot of outreach to employers.
Yes, exactly. And that's the beauty of our system. Number one, let me say that all of the services that are offered through the SkillSource Center, both to job seekers as well as to employers, are completely free of charge. And if I can back up just a minute, basically the way we are funded, the Department of Labor supports the workforce development system across the country. And what in the Commonwealth of Virginia, they have given the funding through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. I will refer to that as WIOA, so we don't get stumbled over that. That is given to basically the Virginia Community College System in Richmond, who then distributes it to the 15 different workforce development areas in Virginia. And through that funding, what we are able to do is we are able to offer job seekers employment services and specifically training leading to industry-recognized credentials that open the door for employment. So now, when I say training, we're not educating in terms of trying to help people acquire their associate's or their bachelor's degree. What we're doing is short-term training that is going to get them employed into a job with a sustainable wage, and we're talking at least a minimum of $15 and hopefully higher than that. And in being able to do that, if they can get employed, that puts them on a career pathway that has various entry and exit points. They might not be interested in pursuing something into the master's or more of a professional level. So they can get this training. If they get that sustainable employment, they can get housing for their family, then they can pursue additional educational opportunities, sometimes self-funded, oftentimes funded through the employer who hired them at that entry-level wage or that entry-level position. So that's one of the things. So what we're trying to do is to work with the employers who come to us and say, I need this kind of an employee.
With this kind of skill set.
The skill set. Last year, in fiscal year 16, now we're in the process, or I'm sorry, fiscal year 17, we had close to 55,000 job seekers visit our 6 SkillSource centers throughout Northern Virginia. And I like to tell employers when I talk to them, I can guarantee you that one of those 55,000 people were the ones that you were looking to hire and would have been the perfect employee. Now what we do, and we have a dedicated team of both job developers as well as case managers, the case managers working directly with the job seeker to fine-tune their soft skills, to help them pursue training. And oftentimes people might have the technical knowledge, But if they don't have those soft skills to be able to sell themselves and to be able to conduct themselves within a professional environment, they might not be that perfect employee. So the case manager works with those job seekers. Our job developers then reach out to the local employers. And we're very upfront with our local employers about the communities that we're serving. So as you say, there's that disconnect when you have to check the box. But if you have one of our job developers who can tell you, this person does have a few challenges and these are what they are, but this is how we have addressed them, and you tell us what you need us to do to help this person to be the perfect employee, and quite often we are able to do that through the funding that we receive both through WIOA as well as through a variety of private foundations that also support many of our workforce programs.
Well, that to me seems like a win-win, and you are talking about huge numbers. Like you have tens of thousands of employers who've used SkillSource, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Tens of thousands. And you know, over 1 million people who've come through the doorway looking for jobs. And you are, I think, performing a really valuable service in assessing both what the employee is looking for and what the employer requires. It's kind of like matchmaking. Mm-hmm. Matchmaking.
And what I want to make sure that I point out that we work with the Fairfax County Department of Family Services is our SkillSource one-stop operator, and staff at least our 3 centers located in Fairfax County and work very closely with our SkillSource Center in both Prince William and in Loudoun County. And what we are able to do with basically what we're able to do through Fairfax County and through the other county organizations, people are coming to us without a job. They're often facing a number of other problems. They might have housing issues, they might have child care issues, they might have substance abuse or medical insurance issues. Any number of issues that they might be confronting, and you can't deal with any one single issue in a vacuum. So through our connection with DFS in Fairfax County and through the Prince William Department of Social Services and the DFS in Loudoun County, we're able to make referrals to them to other social services that they might need, because we're dealing with a whole person. You can't have a good employee if they don't have someplace to live. You can't have a good employee if they can't get to the job. You can't have a good employee if they have to stay home because their children are sick.
And that is such a good point. And when we return from our break, we are going to talk further about how SkillSource is meeting the entire holistic needs of the people who are job seekers. So please join us after this break.
Maybe he's really focused.
Hey, Michael. Michael. Maybe he likes spinning the wheels.
Maybe he just loves trucks.
Maybe he's just being a boy.
Preoccupation with objects is one early sign of autism. Learn the others today. The sooner it's diagnosed, the better.
Got a quarter?
I dare you. I dare you to change the world. Yeah, you. Getting that college education.
I dare you to be somebody important.
Like be a teacher. Or a reality TV star.
I dare you to stand up here.
To call the shots.
To be a role model.
An inspiration. An innovator.
To be a teacher.
Think you can change my life? Make me excited about science like you?
Have a career that really means something?
Then do it.
I dare you.
Welcome back to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and today we're talking about workforce development with Deb Stopak, who is the Director of Advancement for SkillSource, based here in Northern Virginia. Thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today, Deb.
Well, thank you again. As I said, I'm very happy to be here.
So we were talking about the fact that people, if they lack employment, often they lack other services as well. So people might come through a variety of doorways in Prince William or Loudoun or Fairfax County and end up with you, or they may come through your door and they need other services. So it's really kind of an ecosystem of which you are an integral part, because without employment, it's much harder to get health care, child care, or housing.
Exactly. And let me point to one of our programs, actually 2 programs under the same umbrella, in which we work with what we call the TANF population. TANF stands for the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. And basically, this is a program that is helping people in a short term, not for a long-term period, but for the short term. They need a hand up, they need assistance with child care, they need assistance with housing, they also need assistance with employment. And through the TANF agencies, through the various departments of family services and social services, they're able to refer them to us, and we have a dedicated job development team working specifically with these families that have these specific needs. And again, if I can reiterate, we deal with several different smaller micro populations that face very specific challenges to their communities. For instance, in Northern Virginia, we deal with a very large immigrant community. Within that immigrant community, oftentimes there's a very sizable refugee community. Refugees are people who have oftentimes been helping our government throughout the world, and for fear of their lives, persecution, literally under the threat of death, oftentimes have to flee their homes with their families with nothing more than the clothes on their back.
Right.
So again, those communities are going to be different than the populations, for instance, I had mentioned serving the ex-offenders. And so between our job development teams, what we try to do is zone in on the particular needs for whatever population we're dealing with, and everybody's going to have different challenges and different issues. One thing I had mentioned to you earlier, the way I came to know about SkillSource, I have worked my entire life. I've worked since I was 12 years old. Well, back in 2008, when the economy hit the skids, I got laid off. I became a dislocated worker. I had a bachelor's degree, I had a lifelong history, a very reputable employment history, and I couldn't find a job. The way I ended up at SkillSource was working with a number of headhunters and temporary agencies that finally put me into a temporary assignment at SkillSource, and that's how I discovered this as a resource. I could only say I wish I had found out about SkillSource 9 months earlier. Now, maybe I wouldn't have ended up at SkillSource, which I'm glad things worked out the way they have, because truly, and one of the things that I want to say about our SkillSource centers is that the staffing at the SkillSource Group itself, many of us have been with the SkillSource Group for going into decades of employment within the social services. These are people who are very dedicated to what we do, and we have a mission, and it's not just collecting a paycheck every Friday. It's to help improve our community and to help our neighbors. Because if our neighbors are unemployed, if our neighbors are facing problems, I can assure you sooner or later those problems are going to impact us as well.
And we hear about unfilled jobs. I mean, we hear about companies that are having a difficult time finding people to fill their jobs. So this really is a matter of getting the businesses to bring what they have to offer and finding workers who may or may not have the skill sets currently, but can certainly be developed to be the employees these employers are seeking. I just think, and the fact that it doesn't cost the job seekers anything too, because a lot of times that's a barrier. When people don't have anything and they're trying to find employment, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to do this show, actually, is because I don't think enough people, both businesses and job seekers, understand that this resource is sitting there. The staff is waiting for them to walk through the door so that they can assist them.
That's exactly right. And one of the things that we try to do, workforce development has many players, and we're trying to convene these players on the same playing field so that they understand that there's a team out there, and through that team approach, everybody's needs are going to be met. we are working with those job seekers who need that extra help. And I don't want to get overly technical, but for instance, with employers, 2 programs that we have that are incredibly invaluable. One is called on-the-job training. And what we do is that the employer comes to us, we know what kind of an employee they need, we specifically train and employ a job seeker, and then we will put them in an on-the-job training in which we are able to subsidize that wage for anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks. Depending on the size of your employer, if you've got 50 or less employees, we're going to subsidize that wage 50%. Less than 150, I believe we can do 75%, or less than 240 or 250, 75%. And if you have over 250 employees, it would be 25%. But during that on-the-job training opportunity, the employer is able to work with that employee. If they stumble, if something needs to be fixed, we can do that. Now, 9 times out of 10, that employment opportunity is going to turn into a permanent placement.
Right.
It doesn't always happen. The employee's not
finding
always
a
going
good
to
fit,
be, it's
right? Because
finding
you've got
that good fit.
a good fit. But you know, to me, this is shared risk too. And one of the things that we don't do in this country is apprenticeships. And this sounds very close to me to being something which many other countries have, which is a system of apprenticeships as people learn their way into a bona fide skill set. And we really don't do that in this country. But subsidizing a wage for somebody doing on-the-job training, SkillSource is helping to mitigate the risk of the employer and investing a wage and time into training somebody who may or may not work out. I think this is such a winner of an idea.
And the thing that's great is the employer is never obligated to hire that employee. But it's up to them to make sure that that employee, they want that employee as much as that job seeker wants that job. Now, something else that we can do for employers is something called incumbent worker training. And again, I'm throwing these terms out. But basically, that's taking your current workforce. Maybe they need to upskill. Maybe they are in an entry-level IT position, and maybe with a couple of other certifications, they can move into your cybersecurity department at a higher wage, at a higher level. And what happens when they move out of that entry-level computer job or IT support job? That is an opening that we can then step in and we can give you a qualified job seeker right then and there. We can provide an opportunity through an on-the-job training. So again, it's everybody, the workforce cannot work if people aren't working. And it's up to us to make sure that we are taking and addressing job seekers' needs as well as employers. You can't deal with either one in a vacuum without being able to bring the two of them together.
That is so true. There's a program that the Aspen Institute has put a lot of effort into called the Upskilling of America. And one of the things that they did in Chicago when they first started the program, and I want to say it was in like 2008, 2009, when our economy was devastated and we had the horrible housing crisis, but they had to bring employers in to hire the people they were training. And that was kind of the missing piece. It's kind of like you can train all the workers in the world, but if you don't have employers committed and ready to hire those skilled workers, it won't work. And that's what they discovered in bringing in like major airlines and hotel chains and these other people to be on the board and to be part of the training effort, because they were training these employees specifically for their industry or their companies. So I find this fascinating that we're actually doing this right here in Northern Virginia on a smaller scale.
Right, and again, that's probably one of the trickiest things for me, as my focus is more on developmental activities and grant writing and fundraising, but I also work specifically with some of our individual programs in which I am trying to engage with employers, and oftentimes we need to engage with those employers to find out what their needs are. As you say, we can train anybody for anything, but if they don't have a job that's going to be available, so we're trying to become more of a known resource to the employer community And again, as the convener within Northern Virginia, we're trying to bring these folks together. We have what we call workforce conversations, and in fact, we've got one coming up on Wednesday, November 8th, dealing with veterans trying to find a new career in Northern Virginia. Well, this is a specific topic. For instance, our last conversation focused on ex-offenders. Earlier in the spring, we focused on labor market participation rate, which again is one of those funky terms, but basically that's the number of people who want to work. Are they working? And if they aren't working, why aren't they working? So again, we're convening all of these different players, and we're trying to bring the employers so they can meet with the social service agencies or the community based organizations, for instance, or faith-based organizations that are assisting very small pockets of these job seekers. And as you say, whether they come through our door looking for a job specifically or whether they are referred to us from another agency, we're going to try to put that qualified job seeker in touch with that eager employer and both of them need each other equally.
You know, and this is such a productive team effort. Everybody walks away getting something they need or want out of this process. And it seems like you've really refined the process to be very specific to this area, to the populations, whether it's the underserved, refugees, immigrants, ex-felons, intellectually disabled. I'm fascinated by defense contractors who get laid off. It never occurred to me what happens when your contract employment ends. Where do you go? How do you find another position? And so I'm truly fascinated by the fact that you have really worked so hard to bring the players together in a productive way that meets everybody's needs.
Well, and you bring up something with the defense contractors, our area is very susceptible, and we found out the hard way to the horrors of sequestration.
Right.
And it's not just the defense contractors who got hit hard with that. When they lost their employees, all of those coffee shops, all of those lunch diners, all of the McDonald's and the Taco Bells, all of those areas or those businesses in the community that were benefiting from that level of employment,
they all suffered too.
And so it's one of the things that we are facing in Northern Virginia is how we can try to diversify a little bit and become a little less dependent upon what used to be the safety of the federal government. That's become a little less of a safe haven these days.
Well, thank you so much, Deb. I appreciate you being on the show today, and this is what you need to know.